Hello class. Today we're going to be talking about prisms and pyramids. First we're going to start off by talking about the volume of prisms. My teacher for the day, please make sure that each student has received a handout of the notes that goes along with this PowerPoint. Students, please make sure that you take good notes because the notes that you take on for this will help assist you in the assignments that are to come. I do want to make sure I remind you all that I will be checking these assignments. So please make sure that you're doing good work. Make sure that you're showing work because you know how I am. If you're only giving answers, then you're not going to get any credit for that. So you need to make sure that you're showing work in order to receive full credit, in order to receive any type of credit. So when we're talking about the volume of prisms, so the volume of a prism, the first thing we need to make sure we remember is that the big B stands for the area of the base. And when we're talking about the area of a base, we need to make sure we understand that the area of a base, the base can be a triangle. The base can be in the form of a circle. The base can be in the form of a rectangle. And the base can be the form of a square. Now there are other figures as well. It could be in the form of a trapezoid. But we typically don't do trapezoid. We typically stick with these four right here. Now, I also want to make sure you understand that on the notes page, I actually give you the area for each one of those figures, each one of the four main ones that we're going to be dealing with. The little h stands for the height of the solid. And once you figure out which part represents the base, then the height typically is pretty easy. Let's look at some examples. So when we look at the example 1 right here, notice that we're trying to find the volume of this prism. Now, I will say this. Typically, when your figure has a right triangle, we tend to make note that the base is a triangle. All right. So in this particular case, our base, and then we actually write it. We'll put our base is a triangle. B is equal to a triangle. And so now the formula that I'm using for this is actually 1/2 times the base of my triangle times the height of my triangle times the height of my figure, right? Now, picture if we took this figure right here and we put it upright, right? And so if we put this figure upright, then that means that our triangle would be on the base right here. All right, that's kind of how it would look. All right, I'm not an artist. I'm not Ms. Richardson. Ms. Richardson can do a better job than this. But our base of our triangle would be sitting down. All right, it'll be down here. So therefore, this represents my height. Then we're dealing with the triangle. So when we're trying to figure out what goes with what, well, we know that this right here is my triangle. So therefore, this must represent my base, and this represents my height of the triangle. Well, if these two represents the base and the height of the triangle, then this right here must represent the height of the figure itself. And so now all we're doing is we're just basically doing basic multiplication. And when you plug that into the calculator, you get the volume of this figure is equal to 216 meters cubed. Now remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is showing work. Right? This is not elementary school. I trust that everybody in here can do 1 times 6 times 8 times 9 and then divide everything by 2. I understand that. So this part right here, let me circle it. This is what I mean when I say show work. If you can do this, then that means that this right here is easy. Let's look at the next example. The next example says that we've got another figure that represents a prism. And look what we have. We have another right triangle. So therefore, we can actually say that our base is a triangle. And since our base is a triangle, I'll put it right here. B is equal to triangle. All right. And since my B is equal to a triangle, that means that I have to use the 1/2 B times H. And so now notice what I've got. I've actually labeled my triangle, so trace it. I know that this represents the base and the height of my figure or my triangle part, and then this must represent the height of the actual figure itself. Well, when I plug that in, notice I get 12 inches cubed. All right, let's look at the next one. It says find the volume, round to the nearest hundredth. Well, notice we have another prism right here. And when we look at this particular figure, our base is actually a rectangle, right? And since our base is a rectangle, once again, I'll come over here, I'll label my base is a rectangle. And we know what the form for the area of a rectangle is. Excuse me. And so now, I'm just plugging in things. I know this represents the length of my rectangle. This represents the width of my rectangle. And so this must represent the height of my figure, period. Right? So those two things go with the base, and this goes with the height. Plugging that in, notice we get 372.64 feet cubed. Let's look at the next example. The next example says find the volume of the prism, round the answer to the nearest whole number. So once again, when we look at this figure, we know that since it's a prism, it has to be V is equal to B times big B times H. We know that our big B is a rectangle. So therefore, we must be using the formula length times width times height. Well, if we notice what represents my length, all right, my length can be 7. My width can be 8. And then the height can be 5. And so when we take those numbers and we multiply them together, notice we get 280. And remember, you have to put the unit feet cubed. All right, let's look at the next one. Now we have a cylinder. Remember, a cylinder is nothing but like a Coke can or a soda can or something like that, right? But the way that we set it up, solve it, is still the same. We have to, first of all, we have to determine the formula, where the formula is V equals big B times H. And now let's determine what our big B is. Well, the shape of our actual base is a circle. And since the shape of our base is a circle, that means that I use the formula pi r squared times h. Because this represents the big B part, which is a circle, and then the h is just brought down. So when I look at this, now when I plug things in, well, if I were to stand this upright, notice that my 5 would be still representing my radius and my 10 would still be representing the height. It's just, it's on its side right now, but if I turn it upright like this is what I would get. And so I would just plug in pi times 5 squared times 10. And so when you plug that into your calculator, you should get, and we'll say is equal to 785.398. But remember, this says round to the nearest whole number. So the nearest whole number means that we're going to round that 5. So that 5 is either going to stay the same or it's going to go up. Well, since this 3 is smaller than 5, then it tells this 5 to actually just stay the same. So I get 785 centimeters cubed. All right, let's look at the next one. Very similar to the last one. All right, and this is one that I'll ask you to do on your own. But please understand that right here, this 26 represents the diameter. All right, represents the diameter, and since it represents the diameter, that means that we have to find the radius. All right, so I'll leave that for you to do. But please make sure you. But what I'll do for you is I'll actually tell you what your answer should be. All right, so yeah, that means you should know how to set it up. And so your answer should come out to be 4,778. This is another example that I want you to do. It's just a combination of more than one. All right, it's a combination of more than one. So I'll leave that for you to do. All right, leave that for you to do as well. Give you a chance to copy that down. This is not one of the examples that's on your paper, but remember, this is just a combination. It's basically saying that I have this prism up top, I've got this prism down below, and I want to just combine the two together. So when we combine them together, notice what you get. Right? So this part of the formula represents the volume of the top piece. This part of the formula represents the volume of the bottom piece. And then when I add those things together, notice what you get. So now let's look at volume of pyramids. So the volume of a pyramid, pretty similar to the volume of a prism, except now we have to do 1/3 times the base times the height. Right? So you're still following the same process. You're figuring out what is the base, what type of shape is it. Therefore, that tells me what type of area I use. And then from there, I go through the process of, okay, well, plugging in what I know, and then I'll get my answer. So let's look at this one. So it says find the volume and round to the nearest tenth. So if I'm asking you to round to the nearest tenth right here, the nearest tenth basically says that, well, first of all, what type of shape is my base? Well, in this case, my base is an actual square. And so that means the formula that I will use is 1/3 times 5 times 5, or I could have done 5 squared, times the height, which is 10. When I plug that into the calculator, I end up getting 83.3 units. Once again, notice the setup, the process is still the same. The only thing different is we are actually now plugging in a 1/3 in front of it. And that goes for all prisms and cones. All right, or pyramids and cones, excuse me. All pyramids and cones. Let's look at number 8. Same process. All right. Find the volume, round to the nearest tenth. Well, notice that in this particular case, our actual base is a triangle. And so since our base is a triangle right here, notice what we have to do. We still have to put that 1/3. But now since our base is a triangle, I have to use the triangle formula, which is basically saying 1/2 times 6 times 8 times 7. Or I could have done 6 times 8 divided by 2 times 7. Either way, you still would have come out with the same answer. But let's make sure we understand what things represent what. So remember, this 6 represents the base of this triangle because that's what we have right here. The 8 represents the height of that triangle. And the 7 represents the height of the figure itself. Now, notice there's a 10 right here. Well, that 10 represents the hypotenuse. And remember, the hypotenuse can't be the height of a triangle. The hypotenuse can't be the base of a triangle. The hypotenuse is just the hypotenuse. So just because you see numbers doesn't mean that all numbers are going to be used. You have to make sure you decide what represents what. The hypotenuse of my triangle will never represent the base or the height of the triangle. And so we get our answer. Number 9. Find the volume of the right triangular prism. Round to the nearest whole number. And this is actually a pyramid. I think I said prism, but it's actually a pyramid. Right triangle pyramid. Just like with the last figure, right? We're still using since this is a pyramid, we're still using the formula V equals 1/3 big B times H. Our B is a triangle. So therefore, that means that I do 1/3 times 1/2 times, and we'll do it the way that I have it. It's 1/3 times B times H divided by 2 times H. Right? Because this goes with that. And so now, if we go through and we plug things in, let's go back. We got 1/3. And I know we did this times this divided by 2 times H. That means we get a 1/3 times 3 times 4 divided by 2 times the height, which is 5. And remember, this 5 right here represents the hypotenuse. So therefore, I can't use it. And so when I plug that into the calculator, and remember, you can plug it in as you see it. Right? So that means that I can do, basically, I can say 1 times 3 times 4 times 5 divided by 3 times 2. And so what we're looking at is we're really looking at 60 divided by 6, and that gives us 10. And we have to put centimeters cubed. Right? Number 10. Now we have a cone. And remember, pyramids and cones use the same formulas. All right? So that means that we're saying that this is 1/3 big B times H. Notice that this cone is just turned upside down, so that means that our B is a circle. So that means that I'll be using the formula 1/3 times pi times r squared times h. Well, let's look and see what represents what. Well, we know that in this formula, this represents my radius, and this represents my height. And so now I just plug them in. Pi times 2 squared times 5. So we're looking at 20 point, actually it'd be 21, because it comes out to be 20.944. And remember, since I said round to the nearest whole number, that means it comes out to be 21, and we're going to say miles cubed. All right, I'll leave number 11 for you to do, because it's very similar to this one. So I'll leave problem number 11 for you to do for homework, and I'll also leave problem number 12 for you to do. But I will say this for number 12, please pay attention to the actual base. Yes, the base is a circle, but remember, this represents our diameter. All right, that represents our diameter. And remember, we don't want diameter, we want radius. All right, we want radius. All right, you will receive a handout that goes along with this. Please make sure you're taking your time with this. And this actually concludes everything that we'll be doing for your test. Your test will be next week when you come back from winter break. You will receive a handout this week, which are the notes, not the notes, excuse me, which is a study guide. So I would advise you to take advantage of the break that you have to study, because you will have that test when we return from winter break. My plan is to be back at school that Wednesday that we come back. So please look forward to taking your test when I return. Thank you. Have a great day.